Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. It's a Ukraine War Update Extra video, giving you extra context to this war to give you a greater understanding of what is taking place. Let's go straight to a bit of Dmitry from War Translated. He says, conspirologist Gherkin, so that's our good friend Evil Gherkin, says he believes Prigozhin's mutiny was successful and the balance of power is shifting in the Russian leadership, with powers backing Prigozhin slowly taking over. He says they want to lead Russia to withdraw from the war. I say they're going to lose either way, but any internal struggle is welcome. Great observation by the terrorist. So let's have a look at what our terrorist spokesperson says. Evil Gherkin says, I am forced to seriously consider the version put forward by one of the like-minded people, which is the following. The coup was successful. The powers within the ruling mafia, are currently being redistributed as or close to, planned by the conspirators behind Prigozhin. The Shoigu Vorobyev Sobyanin Tower has lost some of the positions, although not completely demolished, and part of its influence and resources flows into the group of oligarchs of the Azero Cooperative, Rottenbergs, Kovalchuks, and co. This group, vitally interested in ending the war on any terms, will not let us win in any case and will lead the president to realize the need to accept defeat and transfer supreme power to its successor nominated from this group. Kiriyenko, Prigozhin, question mark. In the coming months, we should expect new campaigns aimed at undermining not only of the Russian forces Ministry of Defense, but also at the demolition of the influence of Patrushev and those parts of the FSB that are not controlled or not completely controlled by the president administration and the oligarchic groups behind it. In the meantime, they will do everything so that the urgently necessary measures to prepare the army, rear, and industry for a long, hard war are not taken or slowed down as much as possible. This may include major defeats at the front caused by a lack of reserves and a shortage of personnel, military equipment, and ammunition. And then these defeats will be the reason for a new blow to the Siloviki in favor of the peacekeepers, or rather supporters of surrender. Okay, what's going on here? Well, it looks like the mill bloggers are talking about a potential move within the Kremlin and its environs to replace Putin, to have then pull out of the war. And this idea, it's also floating the idea that a lack of ammunition, losses on the front. I don't know whether this is kind of trying to explain away why those things might have already started happening. It fits into this kind of conspiracy that it's actually done on purpose in order to feed into an ending of the war that will be to the desires of the oligarchs and these elite, this Moscow elite, and that may include certain sort of military people as well. Prigozhin being, of course, one of them. So I don't know whether this is something that is actually happening, but if people are starting to wonder whether it will happen and whether it is happening, then you have got confusion and chaos behind the scenes in the Kremlin and around. We've had a couple of weeks of this kind of chaos, a lack of cohesiveness within the Russian military administration. And I don't know, ideas like this, I think, are reflective of the fact that people understand that it's not all going so well. Uh, it just, yeah, it's as hinted by Dmitry here. Get your popcorn. This is, yeah, I say they're going to lose either way, but any internal struggle is welcome. And this is a sign of internal struggle. Yes, it might be a conspiracy theory to suggest that some kind of internal struggle might be taking place that isn't. But still, you put those ideas out there, and all it is just a reflection that all is not well behind the scenes. Speaking of which, Wagner commander Berserk hints that Kadyrov's Akhmat army is on Prigozhin's side, and they're all just getting warmed up. Russia is collapsing. So we go through this. I'll read out the subtitles because I know a lot of people just listen to my videos. So this guy says, "Good day, everyone. I'm the field commander of PMC Wagner, call sign Berserk. We are located in brotherly Belarus near Osipovichi. On behalf of the Field Commanders Council, I'd like to tell everyone who lost their spirit that this is all just the beginning. Our March for Justice showed a lot of interesting things without saying directly. I'll only mention that certain units of the MOD that were allegedly stuck in traffic did arrive in the end to Rostov. So this is referencing the Akhmats, the Kadyrovites, who trundled into Rostov, and they, while Prigozhin's Wagner PMC had taken control of Rostov, I think in looking for Gerasimov, who was in Rostov or was supposed to be there, but then the FSB got news that Prigozhin's Wagner were going to rebel, and so they were pushed into rebelling sooner than they had anticipated, and that meant they rushed everything, and they weren't able to get hold of Gerasimov, who had done a runner. That's how I understand it. Anyway, Kadyrov came out in support of Putin and sent his Akhmat special forces to support Putin in going to attack the Wagner PMC. But lots of people saying they were stuck in traffic. If they really wanted to get into Rostov, they would have done that, right? So they're there, showing themselves, looking around for Wagner, and it was all a bit late, and they're supposedly stuck in 2 traffic jams. What possibly this explains that better. So he says the units of the MD that were allegedly stuck in traffic, which is the Akhmat MOD, so not really MOD, but fighting for Kadyrov, did arrive in the end to Rostov. In the first minutes, their commander, a very decent officer, found dialogue with our Ratibor. We arrived at very interesting conclusions, which eliminate some of our previous arguments. Thus, you should know that there are like-minded people among your loyal footmen. Interesting. So I'm just going to pause that. Together we are strong, so I'm happy to please many of our supporters. Friends, it's all just beginning. How ominous. PMC Wagner and its path is far from over, although they have just got rid of all their equipment. We're ready for global events and turmoils that the country and we are waiting for. Thanks to all who supported us for being with us. Together we're strong. Amen. And then I guess you could say this could be Wagner just throwing a cat amongst the pigeons here, in just making stuff up and saying, "Yeah, the Akhmat are with us," and then they're going to have to come out and say, "No, we're not," and then it all is highly problematic. Or genuinely, the Akhmat might have actually come to some agreement with Wagner, and hence why they didn't actually go straight into Rostov and start shooting things up. I don't know. Now, the 72nd Brigade, the brigade that Wagner had a right go at for running away to the south of Bakhmut by the canal, which has now turned out to be a conflict around Klishchivka. But before that, near the canal, the 72nd Brigade ran away, and Wagner absolutely rinsed them publicly. So the Russian 72nd Brigade has a small farewell memorial for one of the dead soldiers, and anger is boiling. The 22 survivors have a litany of complaints against the Russian MOD. Is this 1917? So now we are starting to see more and more complaints. You put this together with what we've just seen, just all is not well. So you might be wondering, why is the Ukrainian counteroffensive going so slowly? Oh, it's a bit of a problem. Yes, it's attritional, but why can't they achieve more? Actually, things are happening, and all is not well behind the Russian lines. Is this wishful thinking? Well, yeah. I mean, I wish that stuff does happen that causes dissent in the Russian ranks, and that there is a deposing of certain personnel. Of course, I do, but that doesn't mean that this isn't happening just because I wish it to be the case. This evidently is happening, and it seems to be happening more and more. So the translation is, and always excuse quality of translation, etc., etc. Let's change the gun, guys. And you got people coming in and sort of laying stuff down. We'll defend where we can. Yes, this is our brother, our soldier, Sir Yoga Chiyov. They say, heavenly brother. We did what we could, each of them saying different things. Come on, brother. Come on, brother. Oh, my dear. This is how we bury. If someone sees this video, this is how we bury the guys who did not make it home. Like this, burned down. This is from a shortage of ammunition. This guy's obviously getting a little bit angry, sharing a bit of drink. The crew was completely burned in the storm. Here, take it off, bro. Uh, Here, the barbed wire. This is how we bury because of the effing commanders. So obviously not happy with the commanders. This is all that was left, guys. They could not do everything in time. They did not make any coordinates, no targets. The guys were sitting in the cars and waiting for the targets, and they were just effed up and they burned down. They are effing expletives. I am a deputy of the commissar. I have 5 calculations, 72nd Brigade. This is the most effing SH1T. I promise you. Special platoon, commanders of the department. And this is how the guys are buried. Who did not make it home? Obviously not buried particularly well for sure. And then the wives call. Sveta calls and says, "Why did you not save him? Why did you not save?" I say, "This is how it happens. If someone sees this, let them F-U-C-K. Remember, you effing bastards. Give me ammunition. Give me the equipment. Send everything." People died just like that. Here, the guys went through Chechnya. They went through Ukraine once, twice. I went to Ukraine in August. This is how we live. I wonder if this is saying actually these guys fought in Ukraine before this latest iteration, which is to say they were involved in as little green men in the illegal war. This is how we carry with us, and all that is 22 people, 2 machine guns are left, and ammunition in the pocket. So he's showing all the ammunition they've got. He's just got out a handful of ammunition from his pockets, and that's basically all they got. And ammunition, he says. And that's the end. So I know, it's anecdotal, it's just a snapshot, but we're seeing so many of these snapshots where people are complaining about lack of ammunition, about lack of artillery cover, about lack of counter battery fire, about lack of rotation, about lack of food, about lack of water, about lack of decent conditions. Just it is this continued, as it says here, litany of complaints from all areas of these fighters. And then you go back and see something like this. So this is back just east of Moscow, a massive brawl breaking out between mobilized soldiers at a military training camp. The cause of the infighting was intoxication and a dispute over a domestic conflict. Reportedly, one soldier was killed and several were seriously wounded. So that then you look at here saying, right, they can't even get the training right. They can't even, nothing is, it seems to be decent and sensible in the Russian ranks here. Here we have trainers getting involved in a mass brawl that ends up in the death of mobilized soldiers. There's we've heard before. There's not the equipment for training. There's not the standard of training that's required to send troops to the front line and expect them to operate adequately. Just it's a big, hot mess, and it's not looking good. All the while, I mean, the Ukrainians are getting okay. They might not be getting the best training. They are getting NATO training. They're getting medical training where they can. It might not be the best in all areas, but what they're receiving is eons ahead of what the Russians are now. I've reported on this before, and some of that footage, I think I've shown that bit of footage before. So there are fewer convicts these days in Russia, and those who remain are not enthusiastic about going to the front line. So now Russia thinks they could be replaced with migrants. Sources in the Russian report in Russia report mass raids on labor migrants, reportedly migrants from the following countries: Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Armenia, Moldova, and Belarus are among the first candidates to get arrested on false criminal cases, both legal and illegal migrants. This is crypto mobilization. Then they will allegedly be sent to war with Ukraine. Now, I can't verify this completely, but these rumors have now been kicking around for several weeks, and we have seen huge amounts of footage like this. Now, why would you do this? Especially, why would you do this now if you've not been doing it previously? What is the difference? Why is this footage coming out now, and we didn't see it 6 months ago, a year ago? This has to be something relevant to the now as to why we are seeing it now. Uh, and the guess is that these are people that are going to be forcibly conscripted to the Russian army. Now, on the other hand, footage like this comes out, concerns raised in Odessa as men in military uniform are seen forcibly detaining people and taking them away in unmarked cars and vans. So we've seen Russian propaganda previously that has been highlighting how people are being press scanned on the Ukrainian side. Now, although this has happened previously, investigations were instigated into those incidents. What I imagine here is probably you're more likely to be seeing someone who was a collaborator who is being found here. One such video, timestamped this morning, authorities have not given an explanation to local journalists yet. You would hope that they wouldn't be doing this to mobilize people because that would not work in their favor. But it could be, but it is probably more likely someone who has, as I say, collaborated or similar. So yes, I've just shown you that. Right, moving along. I want to show you that later. We then, my point of showing you what I've shown you so far is that things are not going well behind the scenes with the Russian military project. Their war effort is crumbling in its administration, as well as crumbling from the bottom up. Those foundations, those uh, mobilized soldiers, and the training that they are not getting, certainly the quality of training they're getting just isn't there. It means that how long can Russia sustain this this war effort? And when you look at problems with Prigozhin's Wagner still existing, and then possibly wanting to do certain things and maybe being together with the Akhmat, with the Kadyrovites. And when you see Igor Gherkin talking about how there could be a move on to stop the war and replace, and not that these ultra nationalists necessarily agree with that. They're just saying they're worried about that. They don't want it to stop because they want Russia to prevail, but they said they're worried that the kind of Moscow elites are putting things in place to stop the Russian war effort. Let me know what you think. Here is I don't. This is not apropos to anything. I just wanted to share this with you. This is claimed to be in Russia. Who knows? Meanwhile, travel on a Russian bus. It might not be, but this is just pretty cool. Oh, whoa, hello. Oh my goodness. Oh, the engine's fallen out. The engine has literally fallen out the back of the coach. Back of the bus. That is insane. If that is in Russia, that's the state of the public transport. Is that because they can't get bits and pieces for their vehicles? I don't know. Yeah, but either way, it's quite not shocking, but quite an interesting looking video. This is a Roman call sign Hulk. He is from the 3rd Mechanized Battalion of the Separate Presidential Brigade. He tells and shows how he operates first-person view drones. Now, this is in Ukrainian, so I can't play you this. There's no translation that I've seen, but he seems to talk through how he does his work, how he operates the drones. I just wanted to show you this beginning part. Let's turn it down a little bit. We'll have the sound on. Doesn't need to be that loud. It gives you an understanding what those things sound like. So often we see them in silence or with like Ukrainian death metal edited over the top. That is a drone, and I remember the times when I showed you pictures of these drones being lined up and manufactured, and had Russian voices or pro-Kremlin voices, trolls in my thread saying it's impossible. They can't carry those RPG-7 warheads. It just can't happen. It's like, okay. It literally happening. I mean, that's not a deep fake video. That is literally happening. Wind your neck in, sunshine. Wind your neck in. What I just wanted to show you is this VR headset on. This is the way war is going. This is where gamers are going to be some of your best soldiers, effectively. Not your frontline soldiers, but hey, they can operate a PlayStation 5 controller super well. Well, come and fly me some drones. You've played on VR headsets. We've got a job for headsets. We've got a job for you. And here he is, plugged into the Matrix, plugged in and doing war. Here, this guy does his war sitting in a bunker surrounded by tech and wearing a VR headset. That is modern warfare, guys. It is different to, I guess, Dad's army back in the 1940s, that's for sure. Right. We will continue with just a nice bit of feel good here. So sometimes it's hard to. I'll read this out and I'll play it. Um, Танцюй зі мною, повільно. I'm probably going to get hit for that. So sometimes it's hard to believe that this is not a movie, but it is really happening to us right now. They passed 86 days of his defense of the Mariupol, withstood 351 days of his captivity, and here they are together and again, and most importantly, they are now married. We wish the same smiles to be soon on the faces of all Ukrainian captives. So here isn't just a happy story. I was reading, as I said to you yesterday, I'm listening to rather than reading Luke Harding's book called The Invasion on the Russo-Ukrainian War. Really good, and sort of reminding me, because you forget this war's been so long, and I've been doing this for a year now, probably, and these videos, and you forget about Mariupol and what happened there, and the terrible situation it was, and what people had to go through. And here we have, the happy ending, at least for these people who, he survived the defense, he survived the best part of a year in captivity, and he's survived to see another day, which is fantastic. And in this case, to marry his beloved, who was there waiting for him. So that's absolutely fantastic. Now, I was talking about prison incarceration yesterday. This is not to do with the Ukraine war, but I will say it anyway. Now, because this isn't just about the Ukraine war, this is a geopolitics channel. The I talked to you about prison. There are three aspects to crime and punishment, or to punishment. One is retribution. That is kind of falling by the wayside. One is deterrence. Turns out that harsh punishments don't actually really deter people, they only have a nominal effect. And the other is rehabilitation. And that's something you can do, and that will affect recidivism rates, which are the amount that you, or the percentage chance you have of reoffending and coming back into prison, like the revolving doors. When we start understanding why people do things, this is really connected to the free will debate. But when we understand why people do things, like you committed crime because actually we understand you. One of the best books I've ever read. Oh goodness, bear with me. I'm going to get it for you. So the first book I ever wrote was on whether we have libertarian free will or not, and we, philosophically speaking, we don't have libertarian free will. I need to rewrite that book. It's probably everything I said in that is still correct. It's just I'm a better writer now. But nonetheless, this is such a good book. I wish I'd read this. This book was published after I wrote that book, but this is called The Anatomy of Violence by Adrian Rain. The Anatomy of Violence talks about why people commit crimes and what the biosocial jigsaw is that determines antisocial and often violent behavior. And once you understand that, you understand why people commit crimes and end up being in that place. Retribution as a part of the punishment system doesn't make any sense. So the idea that you punish people retributively, which is like, I can't believe you did that, you're going to go down for 20 years. When you understand, well, they're always going to do that because of the mix of who they are and the environment they're in, then you understand that actually being like that retribution doesn't really have a place. It's not rationally justified. So then you're left with deterrence. Well, actually, all the data suggests that deterrence, really harsh punishment, doesn't work in deterring people. So crime rates for in Saudi Arabia aren't particularly different from the UK, right? But in Saudi Arabia, you can get your hand chopped off for nicking stuff, or that kind of thing. It doesn't really affect because people have these biases where you're like, I'm invincible, I'm never going to get caught. It's other people are going to get caught, I'm not going to get caught. So that doesn't affect crime. Actually, what does affect crime is the perception of getting caught. So the idea, and it kind of fully fits into that data. So actually, people are less likely to commit a crime if they think they're going to get caught. And it's kind of obvious. So if I go down to my local shop and I'm like, right, I'm going to go and nick a loaf of bread, right? Aside from morality and everything, it's from a practical point of view. If I'm if I if I evaluate that I've got a 99.9% chance of being caught, then I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. So that's really important. So that's a much better deterrence, which means you need really active police, and you need to have things put in place that mean that if you commit crimes, you're more likely to get caught from them than not. Rather than if you get caught, we're going to punish you for like a million years and then cut your toes off. That actually doesn't affect people's potential criminal behavior as much as the percentage chance of getting caught, or at least a perception of that. So anyway, that then leaves you with rehabilitation, which is okay. Now you're in prison. What are we going to do with you? Just keep you here, or what's the point of keeping you here? Uh, Especially if it's a crime where we know you're going to get out in 5 years, right? 5 years, you're going to be out of prison, right? Because you've done this lower level crime. So what's the point of us keeping you here? Well, we don't want you back because that's going to cost us both in societal costs, like in general, like crime is not great, and then monetary costs in the crime itself and paying for that crime, but also in terms of the government paying for your incarceration. So therefore, we need to rehabilitate you, on not only from a moral point of view. So my in libertarian free will kind of point of view, not believing in that idea, you have philosophers like Greg Caruso, for example, and Dirk Pereboom, who talk about uh, the quarantine approach to crime and punishment, which is you've done a crime, we're going to incarcerate you, but we're going to treat you as humanely as possible, and then we are going to make you better, and then when we're convinced you're better, we'll let you out. Which is kind of like what we do if you've got a disease, a contagious disease. We're going to take you in, we're going to isolate you from society so you're not dangerous to society, but we're going to treat you humanely, and we're going to try and make you better, and once we've made you better, you can go back out in society. Well, that's how punishment should work with crime and punishment, which is okay, we understand why you did that, we're going to incarcerate you, now let's do our very best to make you better, and if we fail to make you better, then we'll continue incarcerating you, but humanely, right? But the understanding that actually you're too far gone, or you're too kind of broken or whatever to be able to properly rehabilitate. But if otherwise, we are going to incarcerate you with a view to reintegrating you into society, so that you can assimilate into society. You can become part of society, and you have the skills to do that. And so you look at the Norwegian model, which is giving them skills. You go into prison and then you learn the skills. Yeah, you don't have the freedom to go and do whatever you want whenever you want, but actually it's a more pleasant place to be, because we are giving you the skills, we're upskilling you, so that at the end of your incarceration, you're reintegrated into society and you have something to give to society, and you have the skills to get a job and contribute to society. And the recidivism rates there are less than 30%. Whereas the recidivism rates in the US, for example, is something I can't remember. It depends what the crime is, but it's around the 85%. So in other words, 85% of people doing certain crimes in the US are going to commit those crimes again once they've been in prison. And it's just a revolving door. And then, as I said, that if these are private prisons, then they're not even like interested in you getting better, because actually your money coming back to them. So uh, this is all really, I think, a really important discussion to be having, which is what do we do with incarceration and with crime and with punishment. Now, this is a really fascinating graph here. So Americans held in mental hospital per 100,000 adults, and prison. And when you started seeing behavior as criminal and not mental health, and you can say the same in terms of drugs and Ukraine. So to move this back to Ukraine yesterday said, right, if you read books, then you can have time taken off your incarceration. So that was a pretty cool idea. And also they're looking at decriminalizing drugs, or certain drugs, which would be in line with places like Portugal. Now, if you go and watch on Netflix, documentaries like The 13th, really good, about the 13th Amendment, about slavery, but about how there was a choice whether to have drugs criminalized or to have it as a mental health. Like actually, in any other situation, like substance abuse with your body, like alcoholism, is a mental health thing, right? It's not illegal, and yet Alcohol, because alcohol was already embedded in society as a drug, is not illegal, but smoking weed is illegal. Right. Okay. Why have you got that disconnect? And people end up going to prison for this stuff, but not for this stuff, unless you, through your alcoholism, you do a crime, right? So should it be about hospitalization? Then there's mental health. So as soon as we stopped admitting people to mental hospitals and we started admitting them to prison, because that's the way it goes. So I don't know. I just think that's a really interesting graph there. Now, I know this isn't greatly to do with the Ukraine war at all, but I don't care. I just think it's super, super interesting. This thread is brilliant. It's really eye-opening. I'm not going to go through it in any great detail, but I'll just point out a couple of things. Rise of negative media. Since 2010, the media has massively increased headlines that use fear, anger, disgust, and sadness, and has decreased articles of neutrality and joy. It's no surprise that few media outlets are covering this meta point. And then when you go down to things like this one is really fascinating. The headline death gap: 67% of deaths are from heart disease, cancer, and road accidents. The New York Times barely covers these topics. Why? So actually, deaths from terrorism are virtually none in the US, and yet 35.6% of media coverage of deaths are about terrorism. Homicide, 22.8, and actually responsible for hardly any deaths. Suicide, still completely skewed. So it's just absolutely fascinating, and this is where we have to be so careful about our media consumption, about whether we are getting an accurate representation of what is going on in the world. I mean, this is pertinent to the Ukraine, like the rise of BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and possibly Bangladesh, Egypt, and UAE maybe going forward. G7, BRICS are now 31.5% of global GDP versus the G7's 30%. Wow, that's an interesting stat there. And are we getting? It's just, anyway. I could go on and on. This is just really good thread that I'll probably link to in the description below, and you can go and have a look at this, just to like open your eyes to other things, other ways of looking at stuff. Uh, oh, look at that! Norway's oil fund, 1,339 billion worth of money, and that's the top 10 richest people. Add them together, and it's about the same. So Norway, good to be you, I guess. Anyway, so much cool stuff in there. I'm going to leave it there. I've gone off topic, but who cares? Because whatever. Anyway, thank you so much for all your support, guys. I will get back onto Ukraine war stuff in tomorrow's videos and news frontline as ever, and update extra. Please continue your excellent commentary in the threads below. And I did promise to talk about one comment. I'll have to do that tomorrow, where someone was calling me out on some of the things I said in yesterday's extra. I'd like to respond to that, but that can wait till tomorrow. Anyway, in the meantime, take care.